Let's kick things off. So hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Leveraging Zoning for Economic Resilience webinar. Thank you for registering and being here today. My name is Matthew Leader, and I'm from the National Association of Regional Councils, NARC. We're presenting this webinar in partnership with the National Association of Development Organizations, NADO, and the U.S. Economic Development Administration, or EDA. Quick side note, all the views presented by our panelists today represent their own opinions and not necessarily those of the EDA. I'm really excited for our webinar today. I know I'm going to learn a lot, and I think you will too. We have two experts on economic development planning and small business support with us, so let me take a moment to introduce them. First, we have Kennedy Smith. Kennedy is a senior researcher at the Institute for Local Self Reliance, or ILSR. A lot of acronyms today, I know. Kennedy is one of the foremost researchers analyzing factors that threaten small businesses and developing policy tools that level the playing field. Kennedy served as the National Director for the National Trust for Historic Preservation's National Main Street Center for 14 years before co-founding the Community Land Use and Economics Group in 2004. In 2020, Kennedy joined the ILSR, where her work has helped small businesses recover from the pandemic, combat chain dollar stores and third-party delivery apps, and now helps regional and local planners, like a lot of us, develop tools to design thriving ecosystems for small businesses. Kennedy was honored by Planetizen, one of the nation's top urban planning forums, in 2023 as being one of the 100 most influential urbanists of all time. Kennedy, it's an honor to have you with us today. Welcome. All right. Next, we have Angela Brown. Angela is the Chief of Economic Development in the Boston Area Planning Agency, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the MAPC. Angela is a leading practitioner in the field of community and economic development. She blends a deep understanding of economic planning and community engagement to build policies that make her region's small towns and big cities more resilient. Angela served as the Vice President of Real Estate Development at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, where she spearheaded industrial site redevelopment, back office development in the outer boroughs, and development of neighborhood and downtown commercial districts. Additionally, Angela served as the Director of Programs for the nonprofit, the Hyman's Foundation, where she led strategies in workforce development, family homelessness, public policy, and racial equity. Angela joined MAPC in 2022 and has been leading the Economic Development Division with zeal ever since. Her current work focuses on crafting downtown, commercial, and industrial visions and plans. She will be sharing her insights from this work and her career today. Angela, we are so excited to have you here. Welcome. All right, so to give everybody a brief structure of today's webinar, we'll begin by hearing a 15-minute presentation by Kennedy, followed by our first Q&A period. After that, we'll hear another 15-minute presentation, this time by Angela, and have our second Q&A period to wrap the day up. For our Q&As, I encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The chat function should be disabled, so everybody on the bottom kind of toolbar on your screen, it should say Q&A and have a question mark icon as well. You can pull that up at any time, and I encourage you to put your questions in there throughout the program. During our Q&As, I will look at your questions and try to ask most of your questions to our panelists. In addition to asking questions, you can like and comment on your peers' questions if you want to boost them and give them a higher chance of being asked. For the first Q&A period, that's the one following Kennedy, try to keep your questions brief and directly related to her presentation. It'll only be a 5-minute Q&A. For the second Q&A period, that's the one following Angela, Then we can get into more detailed questions, and I encourage you to bring challenges and opportunities from your own region into the conversation. Thank you so much for your patience and attention. And without further ado, Kennedy, let's get started.
Great. Thank you very much, Matthew. And thank you for inviting me here. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be speaking with Angela, too, who is an old colleague of mine and one of my favorite economic development people out there. So let me share my screen. And I will, there you go. Can you see that?
Looks good on mine.
So, okay, I'm going to start with, as everyone does, talking about zoning, about an auto-related business. Because this is sort of this is a thing that happened to me. I was giving a speech in Western Massachusetts a few years ago, and afterwards, this woman came up to me and she said that she and her husband had owned a business that sold and installed car audio systems. So tape decks and receivers and things like that. And their reason for success, I would say, was that instead of people having to take their car to their shop and leave it for a day and arrange transportation back to their office or their home, they had a little fleet of vans that would go out to wherever you worked or lived, and they would do the installation there. So they were very popular. And their shop was located sort of on the edge of town. They decided that it would be really good for their business to have a showroom in the downtown area where there was a lot of foot traffic and a few thousand downtown workers, and they'd have greater visibility. And so they rented a storefront and opened up a showroom there. They were open for about a week, and the local zoning inspector came and said, "I'm sorry, but automotive businesses are not allowed downtown." And they said, "Well, we don't do installations here. They're all done off site. We keep the installation vans aren't even parked here overnight." And the guy said, "I'm sorry, but the code says no automotive related businesses. You're an automotive related business. We're going to have to fine you $1,000 a day until you move." And so they moved out of there, and within 2 years, their business was dead. Complete fail in zoning and what the town was actually trying to accomplish, because the town really wanted to have a thriving Main Street, but their zoning was just completely at odds with what they were actually trying to do. I should probably back up for a second and ask or answer the question about why small businesses are so important, and important to Main Streets, but important to communities. And there are so many reasons. 99% of all new jobs in the US are created by small businesses. Businesses under 500, 96% are created by small businesses under 50 employees. So it's very, very substantial. A lot of innovation happens there. And lots of new ideas are born. Lots of big businesses grow out of the small businesses that are cultivated in walkable mixed-use commercial districts. They keep money local. There are a lot of studies out there that have looked at how much of a dollar spent in a locally owned business stays in the community versus a dollar spent in a chain or a big box store. And it's about 50 or 60 cents of every dollar stays local with a locally owned business versus as little as 15 or 20% with a chain, because the money is shipped off to a corporate headquarters. They do business with accountants who aren't local. They don't even often own their the buildings, and so they're paying rent to a property owner who probably doesn't even live in the community. That the kind of diversity that you have with a small business infrastructure creates some economic stability for the community, creates entrepreneurial opportunities for people who, instead of graduating from high school and going to work at a fast food joint, can actually start a business or learn skills in a locally owned small business, and then eventually develop their own business and build some community wealth. Small businesses are wonderful at market adaptability. Instead of just carrying the same merchandise or offering the same services that every chain outlet does, they can customize it to what people in the community want and what there seems to be market demand for. They offer great customer service. They have strong community ties. They sponsor, all the Little League things and all the community events. And they have unique character. I could talk for an entire day on some of the unusual businesses that I've seen in my travels and how wonderful they are at really helping a community shape a personality that has real market value because it sets it apart from all other communities. One of the great ironies I have found over the years is that Main Street revitalization actually doesn't take on Main Street. It takes place in the community's planning and land use policies and laws. You can, renovate buildings and do marketing events and do business development activities out the wazoo. But if the community is zoning too much land for new commercial development, it's all for naught, because the district's going to fail. You really have to pay attention to those things. As you all know, there are two primary tools that are involved in this: a comprehensive plan that sort of sets out a vision for what the community wants to achieve, what it wants its districts, its neighborhoods, its commercial districts to be like, and then the zoning code that turns that comprehensive plan into law. There are other planning and land use tools too. Houston, which famously has no zoning, manages to regulate things largely by homeowner association rules. So there are other ways to do it, but most communities have a comprehensive plan and then a zoning code. And there are some disconnects there that we'll talk about in a second. There are two ways to think about strengthening zoning codes in order to strengthen the small business ecosystem that you have and the commercial districts that you have. The first is to remove components from your zoning that hurt small businesses. And then the second is to include components that help them. So I'm going to talk through some of those briefly. In terms of the harms, we'll talk about those first. One of the biggest, and I just mentioned it actually, is not establishing limits on new commercial development. Just like land, earth has an environmental carrying capacity. Communities have economic carrying capacities too. They can't just support unlimited sales. They have sort of a limit to what they can support. But too many communities keep building more and more and more commercial space beyond what we can possibly absorb. The U.S. Department of Energy does a survey periodically. It's not at regular intervals, but they do a survey periodically of how much commercial space there is in the country, so they can look at the energy efficiency of commercial buildings versus industrial buildings versus residential buildings. And this data comes from them. They've found that in 1960, there were 4 square feet of retail space per person in the U.S. In 2016, which is the last time they did their study, there were 41.6 square feet per person, a tenfold increase in basically 50 years. We only have enough market demand to support about 7 square feet per person. That's how overbuilt we are. We just have way more commercial space than we can realistically support. When you have too much commercial space in a community, vacancies are going to grow someplace. That's often in the older main streets, which haven't been as organized as newer shopping centers might be. When vacancies pop up, rents drop. The building owners don't have the revenue they used to have to maintain the building, so they defer maintenance. Property values then drop. The city collects less in property tax revenue. The district begins looking uncared for, and that whole cycle just continues to repeat, that sort of cycle of disinvestment. So propping up small businesses and really developing a thriving small business community is really vital to a community's economic health. Another thing that we often do is our zoning codes will require unrealistic parking minimums. It's only sort of half a myth, but there's some truth in it too, that many communities have adopted zoning requirements that are pegged to the shopping mall industry and its desire to have enough parking to accommodate all shoppers on the second busiest shopping day of the year. When you think about what that means in terms of small businesses, it's ridiculous. It's just unrealistic, especially small businesses that locate in walkable commercial districts that are served by transit infrastructure, where people don't need a car for the day. They're doing things on foot. But yet we often require small businesses to create a large number of on-site parking spaces that they'll never use and that make the space prohibitively expensive for them. Prohibitions that restrict future use of property. And there are many communities that make this perfectly legal. Grocery stores, movie theater chains have been notorious at doing this over the past 50 years or so, where they basically, in order to keep competitors out of the market, will buy a property, resell it, but they resell it with a protective covenant that prohibits them from being used by a competitor for a certain period of time. This is an example that I came across a couple of years ago in a town in Iowa. I know you can't possibly see this, but I'll enlarge it. This section here says the grantee, its successors, and assigns shall not and may not use the property conveyed by this deed for showing or exhibition of motion pictures during the period of 20 years from the date of conveyance. So basically, they're restricting anyone from using that building, which was purpose-built to be a movie theater, as a movie theater for 20 years. And that then, they were able to then open their multiplex on the edge of town and basically take the entire market with them. Our zoning codes have to not allow that kind of thing to happen. And separation of uses, since the 1920s, many communities have used Euclidean zoning, named after, a court case involving Euclid, Ohio, not the Greek mathematician. But what it does is it says, okay, all, upper income housing goes over here, lower income housing goes here, schools go here, industry goes there, shopping mall goes there, making everything car dependent, resulting ultimately in segregation, and really harming the mix of uses that, historically and organically, older commercial districts have always had, where you have, ground floor commerce of some kind. You have upper floor offices and housing. You have small scale industrial uses. You have government. You have nonprofits. You have religious institutions. Everything mixed together and mutually self-supporting. Now let's talk about some of the good things that we can put in planning codes that can help stimulate and support small businesses. One of the most important is encouraging business diversity. I would guess that nobody can tell me what city this is because it looks like every city in America on its outskirts. This is actually Lynchburg, Virginia, but it could be any place. When we let too many chains in, not only do our dollars leave the community, but we begin to make our community look like every other community in the world. If I didn't have these labeled, I bet you could not tell that one of these McDonald's is in Atlanta and one's in Topeka. Nothing about either of them says, oh, this is, a Georgia building or a Kansas building, or that this Target store is in Denver and the other one is in Louisville. They look exactly the same. I have photoshopped out the name and the logo of this business, and I bet everybody knows this is a KFC, and that's a Wendy's, and that's a McDonald's, and that's a Pizza Hut. There's actually a website called, it used to be a Pizza Hut. You can look and see all the Pizza Hut buildings. We're basically letting corporations scatter their logos up and down our highways and, making every community look like every other community and losing a lot of market distinctiveness in that way. And communities are pushing back against that in various ways. They're adopting formula business ordinances as part of their zoning codes, which basically say businesses that follow a formula, in their architectural design, their interior design, their colors, their logos, their uniforms, their merchandising, their menus. If it follows a formula, we want some diversity. We want something other than that. So there are communities that have formula business ordinances that say you can't have more than X number of formula businesses. There are some places, this is McCall, Idaho, which limits the number of business licenses that they'll give out to chain businesses, with no more than 10% of a business category. Communities have size limits in some instances as part of their zoning codes. This is Ashland, Oregon, which limits new commercial buildings to 45,000 square feet. Are impact fees. This is Collierville, Tennessee, which years ago basically said, okay, people can develop new commercial property anywhere they want in our community, but if it's not in the downtown core and there are vacant buildings there that they could be using instead, they have to pay an impact fee. And those impact fees are going to go to the benefit of revitalizing the downtown core. So there are different ways to basically encourage business diversity and make sure that we're providing market opportunities for that kind of innovation that locally owned businesses can provide to happen. Regulating dollar store proliferation. This is a very, very hot issue right now. And I cannot tell you how many inquiries I get from communities all over the country about this all the time. There are lots of reasons that community leaders are concerned about dollar store proliferation. But the one that we're most concerned about is the dangers that they pose to full service grocery stores and ultimately then to community health. There was a study that came out in 2022 from researchers at UCLA and University of Toronto, looking at about 800 communities across the country. And they found that if you have, and I'm dramatically summarizing here, but if you have 3 chain dollar stores within a 2-mile radius of one another, they're almost certain to kill an established full service grocery store or preclude a new one from opening up in that space, because they take off they take just enough of the grocery sales, just a tiny bit from their sort of canned boxed food, that the grocery stores, which have like a 1 to 2% operating profit margin, will fail. So communities are looking at lots of creative ways to control dollar store proliferation. One of the main ways being simply putting into their zoning ordinances that you cannot build a new dollar store within X distance of an established dollar store. A few years ago, it seemed to be 1 mile was the standard that I saw. Now I'm seeing up to 5 miles, and I'm also seeing dollar stores become conditional uses, with one of the conditions being that it will not harm or preclude development of a new grocery store. There are other things that communities do, and some of these make their way into zoning codes, and some simply become programs that the community offers. Oh, we've got lots of resources on dollar stores on our website. I encourage you to go take a look at some of these. Providing, back up. Providing affordable commercial space is another really important thing that can make its way into zoning codes. For example, there are zoning codes that require space be set aside in new commercial development over X square feet for retail or office condominiums, so that by buying that space, the business owner isn't going to get priced out if the rent escalates. Co-working spaces, pop-up spaces can all be part of zoning ordinances or can be freestanding programs. Limiting annual rent increases. There are a number of communities that are gravitating towards this now. New York right now, for example, is looking at offering incentives for property owners who renew small business leases for at least 10 years and agree not to escalate rent more than 3% per year. So the property owner gets an incentive, the business owner has some stability. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the importance of encouraging a mix of uses. And in that, I wanted to go back to the Euclidean zoning thing for a second and talk about something newish that many of you, I'm sure, have heard about, which is form-based codes, which are popping up and either as overlays for existing zoning or as something that takes the place of traditional zoning. And basically, a form-based code says that it's not so much that we're going to say that, the downtown core should have only these uses and it can't have the automotive related businesses, but instead is saying we want the downtown core to look like this. We want buildings to be about this high, to have different uses in them, to have zero setback from the road, basically specifying how a building and a district should look. And in that, then evaluating the uses. So, aiming for something like this, instead of just saying we want, only these kinds of uses in this area or these kinds of uses in that area. The tool that goes with that is a transect, which basically divides a community's spaces working from the downtown core out to the suburbs into transects, where T1 is a natural zone, T2 rural zone would have agriculture, T6, the urban core, would have the greatest diversity of uses. And thinking about it that way, instead of thinking about use-based zoning, but instead form-based zoning, can really open up a lot of possibilities for locally owned businesses and small businesses to thrive, because they're truly benefiting from having a core of downtown workers or downtown residents or people passing through to provide the visibility that they need. My final words are, first of all, ensure that your comprehensive plan states that small business development and Main Street revitalization are priorities. I hear lots of people talk about these in comprehensive planning meetings, and somehow the words don't make it into the comprehensive plan. They really need to be there, and that provides some legal coverage too for local leaders in the event that somebody challenges a development decision in the future. Second is ensure that your zoning code supports your comprehensive plan's goals, that it really does translate that vision for the future into shoe leather. And third, make sure that your planning commission is actively involved in shaping development rather than just sort of sitting back and passively responding to development proposals that people bring to it. Make sure that they're active in saying, okay, we want a developer who can do this for us, rather than simply saying, should we approve this dollar store, a development request or not? That's it for now. Matthew, I'll give it back to you, and I'll take a few minutes of questions, and then Angela.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kennedy. That was fascinating. 96% of all jobs are created by businesses with less than 50 employees. Is that right?
Yep.
Wow. And very interesting, kind of looking at the behind the scenes factors, the zoning, the planning that goes into creating these mutually supportive districts. So now, everybody, if you can go to the Q&A button, it's on the bottom toolbar of your Zoom window. Click on that and type in any questions you have. We have a couple minutes for questions. Again, I encourage these questions to be succinct and relevant to Kennedy's presentation. So I'll give you guys about a minute to ask those, and then we'll get to answering.
I guess I covered all the bases.
You really did. All right, so we have our first question coming in here. All right, second question, third. All right.
These are great questions. And how long do I have to answer them? 1 minute?
Yeah, a couple minutes. So
Yeah.
Kennedy, why don't you pick one?
Yeah. Yeah. I could look through a couple, I think. I mean, to Katie's question about do you see any traction on allowing commercial uses in residential zones like cafes and neighborhoods? There actually is a lot. There's a lot happening on that right now. There are a lot of communities. Macon, Georgia's thinking about this. Philadelphia's thinking about it, about creating like corner store programs to actually, encourage small grocery stores to locate in residential neighborhoods, as well as things like cafes. So I think that there's a lot of momentum behind that right now. Let me see what else we have here. Can I elaborate on formula businesses, dollar stores, affordable condos? I can answer some of these offline by typing them. I will talk about dollar stores for a second because I put a lot of energy into thinking about and working with communities on dollar store issues. They're often affordable because they're basically playing tricks with consumers. If you look at the sizes that dollar stores sell of certain products, they're cheater sizes. And I have a whole slideshow I could show you of, instead of having a box of 32 tacos, you have 31 tacos. Because they use their market clout, their market muscle to go directly to the manufacturers and demand special sizes and special prices on things that other retailers can't get. So that's a real problem. They also cannot compete when it comes to the prices on fresh produce because they don't have the logistics networks built out in order to store and transport fresh food. So like Dollar General right now is expanding into DG market formats where they say that they're adding more fresh food to their offerings in response to pressure from communities. And if you look at what they're offering, it's mostly shelf stable fresh food like potatoes and onions and garlic. It's not like fresh leafy vegetables. They just can't compete there on price with grocery stores because they can't really provide them. So it's a tricky question. And when you think about the benefits of having a grocery store that has 20,000 different shopkeeping units that it offers, in food versus a dollar store that has maybe 200 SKUs. There's simply no comparison when it comes to building a healthy community. Many communities are addressing dollar store proliferation now by doing healthy food overlay districts, where they have designated areas that have food deserts in them, designated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where they are, really being very aggressive about stopping dollar store development and also providing lots of incentives for grocery store development and for fresh food development, including going through the zoning code and making sure that it allows urban gardening and urban composting and all those things that can help create a healthy food infrastructure in a neighborhood. I'm sensitive to time, so I will respond to some of these in writing and let us get to Angela.
That'd be great. Thank you so much, Kennedy. So very interesting. Everybody, I appreciate your questions. We had about 7 really good questions, and I think as Angela presents, Kennedy will try to work through those and type in some answers. So we appreciate your questions on that. Angela, we're going to go to you now. I'm going to add a spotlight. Oh, take off spotlight here, and I will actually share my screen, and we'll have 15 minutes. So let's get right into it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the opportunity. Good afternoon. My name is Angela Brown, and I serve as Chief of economic development here at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which serves 101 cities and towns in and around and including the city of Boston here in Metro Boston. Again, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or MAPC. Here, I'll just briefly allude to the Economic Development Division's mission, which is to assist municipalities and their local partners with the tools, skills, and supports that they need and can benefit from to implement economic development programs and policies, including land use policies. You can go to the next slide. And so today, I'm going to do a couple of things. One is I wanted to offer a couple of framing points about economic resilience and how that might relate to commercial districts, to commercial district vitality, to commercial district evolution, particularly around our both cities and towns all around the region and other metro regions that might be on the call today. So I'll look at a couple of definitions and offer some cross-cutting points. And then at the end, I'm going to pivot over to a couple of case examples, looking at 2 towns within the Boston metro area. So that's what's on deck for today. So first, economic resilience. This is one definition that the EDA uses, really looking at, you'll see the terms here about both planning and implementation that can really help an area, a place, a community, a region to both withstand and recover from adverse, either short-term shocks or long-term challenges in economic or other conditions. And that's, running the gambit from things like natural disasters or climate events or long-term economic trends or threats. Can you go to the next slide? And so thinking about economic resilience, this is just another way to put words to that term. Again, what I like about thinking about actions that really can protect against some of those undesirable issues or threats, and really looking broadly at programs, the built environment, a lot of different things, and bringing a long-term lens to this definition. Another definition I'll just read out to you briefly. It comes from our colleagues at NADO, that's NADO, not NATO, National Association of Development Organizations, and they really talk about the ability of a region or place to anticipate, withstand, and bounce back from shocks, disruptions, and stresses. Again, those could be weather-related or climate-related, as we might say. It might be the closure of a major employer in a community where a lot of the jobs are dependent on that one employer, either closure or perhaps relocation. Or it could be changes that have brought about a long-term decline in overall industry. Again, that particular place sees a lot of jobs and economic benefit from. Next slide. So a couple of points about thinking about downtown vitality or commercial corridor vitality versus resilience. And I'm just being a little provocative here to kind of just underline a point. So certainly when we talk to many of our cities and towns, they are super interested in kinds of supports that can really boost things that are desirable for a commercial district, distinct actions like some of those that I'm listing here, marketing and events and promotions, quick grants, emergency funding to small businesses that can really, but again, thinking largely about commercial district activation and beautification and what have you, those certainly can have great benefits around increasing the visibility, the appeal of an area, get the foot traffic happening again, get more visitation, increase the dwell time of those who are visiting a district because they're better informed now. I know I can go and purchase this here or get that experience there or that service there, increasing their patronage. And these are all things that certainly can get added spending and benefit to those existing small or other local businesses. So I'm not trying to minimize vitality. These are kind of all vitality focused activities, but really thinking about short versus long term, what are some other kinds of effects that we need to put into place? One thing I will say with the focus on marketing promotions, activation, sense of place, they can be also a great venue for activating your community members, volunteers, members of the planning board, committee members, just concerned residents to act in concert and build relationships across sector. And I'm going to come back to that because I see that as a key part of economic resilience. Next slide, please, Matthew. So applying the concept of resilience to business districts, really thinking about what are some actions that would help to reposition, evolve, and strengthen the commercial districts. Well, Kennedy's already talked about increasing and improving the diversity of the business mix. Making that mix more diverse is certainly something that will increase the performance, hopefully, and help with, for example, the second goal, managing vacancy. Really being creative about and intentional to make sure those vacancies get filled up, and hopefully by not just duplicating already existing services or being really thoughtful about vacancies, identifying and leveraging what are some clusters or kind of economic centers of gravity, if you will, in the commercial district, and thinking about that. So is it a commercial district that either has or wants to be a destination for restaurants and food services and the like? Is it a place that could be or wants to be or has a base of already of entertainment, indoor recreation, other kinds of related activities? Maybe it's a convenience district that just really has a good base of those grocery and full service that Kennedy was talking about, with some other day-to-day outlets for day-to-day needs. Or alternatively, are you seeing a mixture of both retail, consumer-facing activities and that light industrial? In New England and many of our Massachusetts towns, we have some older legacy towns, and sometimes commercial and industrial are kind of side by side. Thinking about, are those districts that could house, for example, commercial activities, creative economy activities. So artisans, artisanal producers, that brew pub, thinking about mixed use districts, is it something to really take advantage of? Last and not least, in that last bucket here, I want to lift up some of our towns have a fabric of ethnic and commercial core fabric that really serves diverse communities from different national identity groups, speakers of other languages, immigrants, etc. And that has to be seen as an economic niche and an asset that we want, hopefully, that commercial district to build on and retain as it grows. And that's a big question. So really looking at, again, what are some of these assets and directions that the commercial district could go into if we apply a little bit of a long-term lens and be intentional about those activities. Next slide, please. Continuing to apply this concept of resiliency to business districts, also thinking about community ownership. And here I'm thinking about literally ownership, as in fee ownership of the property, or who are the owners of the businesses based in those activities based in part of the economic fabric in a place, or also kind of using it more figuratively, thinking about the community's sense of ownership. Do residents and stakeholders really see themselves as having social ownership, if you will, that they have a stake in what happens in the commercial district, that they have the ability to influence that? And I have a couple of examples I'm going to come back to. That too, as I mentioned earlier, that sense of community buy-in and engagement is a type of resilience in my view. All of these things can, I do believe, zoning and zoning reform and zoning activities can really be a vehicle and a platform to breathe life in all of those type of outcomes that I just listed. It's really a way to be proactive, more forward-looking, thinking long-term. What is the mix? What is the identity? What are the characters? What are the minimum and maximum, sort of footprints of these things? What's unique or special about the place, the commercial center, the village center, the town center, the commercial corridor? And what are those features we want to build on, both socioeconomic, or it might be physical attributes of it's got access to a great bike ped path, and that's a visitation opportunity and an amenity to build from. All of those things, and how do residents help to shape that? So we did some work in the town of Holliston, about 15,000 residents in the outer section of the metro region. Despite being somewhat of a smaller community, this actually is a community that has 3 different types of really robust, kind of distinct commercial/commercial industrial areas. I'm going to focus my comments on efforts around the town center. We engaged with this town on sort of 2 objectives. One was to help them craft some visioning statements around the different commercial industrial districts. And so looking at the town center, this is some of the shops that make up the village center. Really, what are some of those assets to build on, and the vision statement. Also, we provided them service options. This is a town where the economic development function was 100% volunteer based through the members of their economic development committee, and several towns are like that. And that was really the client that we worked with most closely. We provided to them a service model where what are some activities that you can do in an unstaffed volunteer model, and then what are some activities that you could do and layer into that if you even go to a half-time or a part-time staff, and what are those bigger or longer-term efforts. So that was very interesting. I'll just focus for a moment on one of their main existing conditions and desires was they do have a fabric of independent and local small businesses, and they wanted to do much, much more to attract and support new and expand existing small businesses. Over the longer term, there was a bigger question about critical infrastructure. I'll come back to that. So in the short term, next slide, please. The town was very interested in, again, that service model. What are the kinds of things they should be doing in the next 1 to 2, 3 years, assuming 0 staff, all volunteer, and then a little bit of increase. And with both, we really said, double down on your small business support. We gave them some recommendations about engagement. Interestingly, this is the EDC, their volunteer committee, and many of their stakeholders were really rallying around much more relationship building, both with existing and would-be entrepreneurs. A lot of hidden entrepreneurs in the town wanted to have much more relationships across the different kind of volunteers. The EDC members wanted tools to be better ambassadors or really spread knowledge about the non-residential zoning in Holliston, so that all members who wanted to weigh in on these things could be better equipped with information about their zoning. So we helped write for them a really short, succinct 2-3 page zoning fact sheet that EDC members and town staff could, as they're walking around talking with residents, just put that in the person's hand. They're better prepared for the next time there's a zoning change, or even to do a review of a business site proposal, show up at a planning board, weigh in. Basically, to that end, this was a town that really wanted their vision statement, and I quote, was that they wanted to ensure that a wide cross-sector of the community are identifying the key strategies. I think that is a beautiful thing, a great goal, and this tool helped them to do that. My insight here is that actually a big constraining factor that this community is going to be grappling with is that infrastructure, mainly issues of both bike ped access as an asset to build from, and then that sewer wastewater disposal. These were actually constraints on the downtown that right now are a barrier or consideration to recruiting additional restaurants and food service. So thinking about your zoning, maybe one avenue, but also these bigger long-term challenges about getting some more infrastructure services built in the town, they're going to have to go after grants to so do. So that was one case study where zoning info as a community activation tool. Next slide. Another example is in the town of Medfield, Mass, about 13,000 people. We did a study, if you see to the slightly upper left corner, this is a community that has definitely has a downtown shopping and civic center highlighted in sort of the pale yellow. But we also did wanted to support them in looking at what is an existing mixed and commercial industrial area, about 200 acres, most of that wetlands, but then also home to about 500,000 square feet of a assortment of built out, right, of commercial, light manufacturing, landscape companies, contractors, some consumer facing activities kind of sprinkled in. So really wanted to make sure that this area could be preserved and more like infill type of development. After our assessment, we came up with recommendations that are largely zoning focused and really using zoning as the platform to do some activities going forward. We recommended changes to the use table to include more light manufacturing, artisanal by right, or with somewhat less review. Things like food production activities, the makers of hand-produced items, furniture repair, some retail uses, cultural uses, institutional uses, again, increasingly looking to see some of those by right, but then some with special permits or perhaps development review. Dimensional requirements were a big part of this assessment and really just trying to give them 21st century modern zoning ideas for that, making sure there's good language about heights or setbacks that wouldn't inadvertently just bottle up those possibilities of infill development. We also came up with some recommendations about cleaning up some of the language within their zoning code article about the numbers of items going through special permitting or development plan review. Indeed, there was some language in there about permitting that for changes that are non-physical in nature, you're still having to go back to the town and get approval to actually transfer the business. And that was feeling like, what are some opportunities to just kind of streamline that? In some cases you want physical changes or the nature of that activity to be subject to review in the ways that Kennedy has talked about. But if it's a transfer from one independent restaurant to another, does that have to really, go through these reviews? So really thinking about, again, we feel like as this is implemented, this will allow this industrial / mixed use district, which by the way, if successful, having more daytime employees and workers in this area would then potentially support the city's, the town's village center and the commercial fabric that is there, right? That this could be synergistic and improve the business mix. And again, looking at manufacturing. So I've briefly captured some of these points. This is just your recap of some of the things we talked about today. I think I would just invite you to think about some words, perhaps, or some principles very quickly that could be prompts for important values as you're thinking about planning and zoning or other land use regs. Is the commercial district, is it functional? Is it beautiful? Is it useful to a variety of human activities? Is it safe? Is it welcoming? Hopefully some of these remarks have inspired some of your thinking, and I'll pause there. Thank you again for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much, Angela. That was really interesting to see kind of Kennedy give the big picture, and then you kind of dive into those specific examples. I really appreciated you going into that. We have about 7 minutes now for a Q&A. So I'll give everybody about a minute to get into the Q&A section. And again, that's right at the bottom toolbar on your Zoom page. You can open it up and ask questions in there. I guess, and those can be towards Kennedy, they can be towards Angela. I'm encouraging you guys to tell us a little bit about your own region, or bring in, maybe a problem or an opportunity specific to your local area as well. In the meantime, Angela, I'd love to just kind of reiterate, if you could reiterate the difference, because I think this is something that both you and Kennedy touched on, was the difference between vitality and resilience, and kind of the behind the scenes nature of resilience planning.
And they do definitely tend to overlap, but I think of it very simplistically as short-term and long-term. Some of the vitality things can be done fairly quickly, and hopefully have that somewhat faster result. At the same time, they are, in many cases, when it comes to marketing and promotion, or festivals, or activation of vacant or public realm spaces in a commercial district, you kind of want to learn and evolve and continue those. It shouldn't be one and done. So that's my one sort of idea about vitality. And again, just sort of lifting up that even as one is doing those kind of district management activities, thinking about what's the long-term trajectory, and how can stakeholders, community, really start to set a vision and put those into place and into motion on those knottier issues. It's not going to be overnight that you fix a vacancy or alter the business mix or have more local ownership. That's going to take planning, strategy, execution, implementation, and follow-up, resource mobilization. It takes all of those things.
Right. So it's the mix of both short and long-term strategies.
And I think maybe a little provocatively, that cross-sectional relationship building, I posit, is a form of resilience, to have a better prepared community if something unanticipated were to happen. That hopefully there's those dialogues, those relationships, the ability to mobilize and come up with some ideas. That's a form of resilience, to respond to something that might be unforeseen, for sure. Also key to the long-term work.
Absolutely. So I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat. Go ahead, Angela.
I had one, which was, I was really taken by, I think it was Katie's question earlier, and wondered, I didn't see if Kennedy, you had some thoughts. I had some thoughts about affordable set-asides, that ground floor retail or other kinds of, again, smaller unit size, more diverse, but she also mentioned the issue of sometimes it's too expensive for the merchant or the independent, locally held business. And I was wondering, what are the levers for that affordable, protective, active community retail, small business opportunity that still make the rent affordable?
And just to read that question so everybody's kind of aware of what we're talking about. So Katie said that our zoning code already requires that in certain areas, downtown core, a certain amount of the ground floor space should be dedicated to commercial space, which is great. However, many of them are way too expensive for small and local business owners. It's like the owners can't or won't reduce rent. Perhaps they even get incentives if they're vacant. Do you have any suggestions for making these commercial spaces more affordable? So and Kennedy already answered in the chat, but I'll open that up for Kennedy or Angela if you guys want to take a stab at that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of approaches that communities can take. One that I see more often than you would expect is that I see communities like thinking of Bradenton, Florida. I was there relatively recently. The city built a parking garage downtown, and they created a row of liner storefront spaces on the ground floor. which, the city didn't really need the revenue from, so they could make those spaces available very affordably. And they were small spaces. They were great for startup businesses. So look for opportunities like that to do it. I also think that intentionally limiting development of chain stores in your ordinances in your zoning code can help with that, because what's happening when you have rents that are too high is that you've got property owners that are kind of speculating. They're waiting for chains to arrive. The kind of the weird irony in this is that chains are never market leaders; they're market followers. They wait until the market is kind of hot, and then they want to move in. So you get property owners who are kind of like holding onto their property, waiting for that day. And once the chains start paying the higher rent, it shoots up for everybody. So if they know that there's going to be a limit on chain stores in this district, then they're not going to hold on to the property so much. I also think that enacting vacant property ordinances as part of your zoning code can be a valuable tool. Basically, it says to property owners, you have to register a vacant property within this district with the city. You have to pay a registration fee. You have to file a plan basically telling us how you plan to use that space. And every 6 months or so, you have to re-register it if it's still vacant, and the fee is going to double or triple, and it's going to continue to escalate. And that becomes a disincentive for them to keep the space open.
Kennedy, I have a thought on their second one about the market makers and market leading activities. We are in early discussions with a community who's giving some thought to a type of inclusionary zoning, meaning and this would entail both needing to make definitions of a zoning incentive. So maybe it's a density bonus, if you will, but tied to the provision of affordable commercial spaces. And then the second component of that would be having to come up with a legally defensible definition of affordable commercial rents. No easy there, but I'm just so heartened that one of our local partners is giving some thought to this already. I think it would really dovetail with what you said about the market leading opportunities in your second component.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'll be curious to see where that goes, and if it ends up happening. I think there are a lot of communities that would be interested in that.
Absolutely. All right, Kennedy, Angela, thank you so much for all your work in preparing and delivering this webinar. I learned a lot. I hope everybody who attended did as well. I'm going to drop the link to NARC. That's our website in the chat. If you guys want to stay connected and look out for future webinars, we have a lot coming up this year, so stay tuned. Angela and Kennedy, again, thank you so much. And we will be sending the recording of this webinar out to everybody who registered shortly. So have a good afternoon, everyone.